Good evening. My name is Phil Schomber. I'm the adult programmer here at Hedberg. I want to thank everyone for coming. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker, Julie Hill. Julie is the Horticultural Outreach Specialist for UW-Madison Division of Extension. I know a lot of us love to see hummingbirds dart in and out of our yards. Some of us actively take steps to attract them to our yards. And Julie is going to share a little bit tonight, teach us a little bit about hummingbirds, and give us some tips on what we can do to better support them. So with that, let me turn it over to Julie to get us started.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Before we dive in, I kind of usually start my programs with a question. I am curious what you are wondering about. What brought you here? What are you thinking about? What are you wondering about with this topic about bringing hummingbirds to your yard?
You want us to raise our hands?
You can just shout it out. We can be really casual.
I'm looking to plant plants to attract the hummingbirds.
Okay, great.
I want to know how to get more than one at a time.
More than one at a time.
Julie, could you,
Yes.
just for our viewers at home, repeat the question as they're getting asked?
Yes, I will do that. So I'm just wondering what, and for you at home too, what are you wondering about? So far, what plants to plant to attract them and how to attract more than one.
I'd like to know if there's anything harmful I have in my yard that would deter them or
Okay.
cause them harm.
So that's a great one. Anything harmful that might be in your yard that might be deterring them or affecting them negatively.
How do they get along with other birds?
Oh, how do they get along with other birds? Good question. Anything else that you're wondering about? Those are all good ones. I'm writing them down. And I'm going to give a disclaimer. I am not an ornithologist, which would be somebody that studies birds. I am not a hummingbird expert by any means. So my role is with Division of Extension, and I do serve Rock County, and I also serve Walworth and Jefferson counties. And in that role, I'm a horticulture educator or outreach specialist, as Phil said before. And so part of that is to give educational programs like this, especially to the residents of those counties that I serve. Working with Phil at the library here has been great, and other kind of community-based outreach programs and organizations. The other big part of my role is that I answer your gardening questions. So I'm just make sure this works, maybe. There we go. So all my contact information is back there. You can contact me directly with any gardening questions that you have, or indoor plant, outdoor plant, lawn, garden, vegetable garden, tree, soil questions. Anything in your landscape, you can contact me directly. You can call me, text me, email me, send me pictures. You know, what is this growing in my yard? What are these spots on my leaves? What is happening to my tree? Anything like that, let me know. That is what I'm here for. And that is a free service to you, and that's provided, you know, to the residents of the counties that I serve. So think of that as a service by Rock County for you. We also have an online Ask Your Gardening Question form, so you can fill that out online. So if you live in one of my counties that I serve, those questions come to me, so you can use that form or contact me directly. If you have a friend or if you live in a neighboring county, those questions still get answered, so you can use that form, and there's volunteers and staff that are using that, you know, and answering questions from all over the state for Wisconsin. So that's a service that we provide to all of Wisconsin. So tonight we are talking more about these guys, the ruby-throated hummingbird. So this is our only hummingbird species in the Midwest. And it, the breeding range is on there, so that kind of orangey coral color is its breeding range. So it's breeding in the whole, you know, southeastern U.S. up to Ontario, Canada. That's where they breed, kind of east of the Mississippi there, you know, not any farther. There's other hummingbird species that are out west, but for us, the ruby-throated hummingbird is our hummingbird species. And so just a couple of statistics. What I hope to go through tonight is to really kind of give an idea about these amazing creatures and really just glimpse into their lives. And so that we have a better understanding of kind of what they're facing and what they're going through, and then how we can help them. So they're small, right? This here, I don't have an actual hummingbird with me, I'm sorry, but This is the actual size, more or less. So their wingspan is about 3 to 4 inches. So that is about 4 inches across, that wingtip to wingtip. So they're little, they're tiny, right? Their weight, if you were to weigh them, is about the same as a penny. That's it. They're tiny. So when you see them flitting around, they don't seem as tiny, I feel like, but they are super tiny. We will talk about their nesting later, but they have nests that look like this. And this is, again, I try to kind of make that actual size. It's about 2 inches across by 1 inch deep. So if you think about the size of a thimble, maybe. That's it. They're tiny. They're tiny. They have these slender, slightly down-curved bills, pretty short wings. Those wings don't reach all the way to the tail when they're sitting down. And they have really short legs. So they are not made for hopping or walking around. They are made for flying. They don't use those legs very much. They, even though they're short, stubby legs, they can still reach that leg around and scratch above their wing. And scratch their neck. At rest, their heart beats about 250 times per minute. During flight, their heartbeat can get up to about 1,200 or 1,300 beats per minute. And they've been called jewels of the garden. I think we can kind of see why. They, and all hummingbirds kind of have that, that name, but ruby-throated are no exception. They have that really beautiful emerald green back. The males, like the one in the picture, have this ruby throat. That's called a gorget. And that kind of varies with the light, but they can also control how they're showing those feathers. And they have this golden green on the back and the crown of their head. The females are going to be more grayish through their throat there. So it might not always look that red, just depending on the lighting too, and kind of how they're displaying it. And a little bit more background. So ruby-throated hummingbirds are a pollinator here in Wisconsin, and that's really important that we work on our pollinators and pollinator habitat. So really just backing up, a pollinator is just any animal that visits flowering plants and transfers pollen to pollen, or pollen from flower to flower. And that's really important because that's how flowers need to transfer their pollen in order to pollinate, in order to fertilize the egg in the ovary of the plant flower, in order to produce more flowers and to produce seeds, which produces food for us and fruits for us, right? And vegetables for us. So we really need our pollinators here in Wisconsin. And there's lots and lots and lots of types of pollinators, mostly insects. But there's a lot of flowers that are ornithophilous, which means they've been adapted for pollination specifically by hummingbirds. And so the structure and the colors of these flowers have co-evolved with hummingbirds, so that makes it really difficult for insects to access the nectar in there, which it makes it difficult for the insects to actually pollinate those types of flowers. And we'll see some examples of those. So these flowers are usually really tubular shaped, so that the hummingbird bill can go into the tube of that flower. Again, insects have a harder time to go in there and get that pollen and get that nectar. And what's interesting, so flowers, and in the evolution of flowers, they don't give away that nectar for free. That is the reward for a pollinator to come visit the flower. And in order for that flower to kind of give up some of that pollen. The flower wants its pollen to be moved around so it can transfer to other plants. I have a video here that will come up shortly about how a hummingbird drinks. There's no sound, so I'm just going to play this and we can talk about it. And this isn't the ruby-throated hummingbird, but all hummingbirds have the same mechanism for how they actually drink that nectar. And there you'll see some close-up and slowed down video here in a little bit. So you can kind of see how it forks out, that tongue. That's the tongue coming out of its bill. So what's really interesting about that is scientists used to believe that they just sort of wicked up nectar, like they stuck their tongue in there and just by capillary action they sort of wicked it up. But then they realized that would take too long, it's too slow, and these hummingbirds are really fast. They're collecting nectar really fast from plants. So their tongue is actually acting as a pump. So they stick it out, and it's about the same length as their beak, and it has those two long skinny grooves on there, or tubes. And the nectar is drawn up by expanding those grooves. And then when it brings it back into its beak, it's squeezed flat, and that kind of collapses and squeezes the nectar off of it. So it's actually acting as a pump, which this is pretty recent where they figured this out. So just kind of, again, just a little bit of background about that, because they're doing this so fast. And as they're drinking nectar, they get pollen on them, so they are able to then, that pollen gets carried around from flower to flower. It might, collect on their bill or on their face or on their feathers and then falls off as they visit the next flower. So they're super fascinating creatures. Let's see if this advances. But because of kind of their lifestyle and their life history traits, that gives them some special challenges and some stressors. So I just kind of want to glimpse into their really fascinating lives, and that's going to give us a little better understanding how our actions in our yards can really support them to help them through those challenges. So one of those challenges is they perform really long migrations across different regions. So they're going to be exposed to maybe different sources of food or lack of food. They could be disposed to potential harmful effects of pesticide use, which we'll dig more into each of these. They have a really fast-paced way of life, and so that makes them have really high energy demands. And that makes them more vulnerable because they have these really high energy demands because they're moving quick. And then their foraging or their feeding habits just exposes them to risk because of lack of food availability, and again, maybe pesticides, because they're feeding on thousands of flowers a day and consuming large amounts of nectar. And we're going to talk about their food sources too. So first up, migration. So throughout their migration journey, hummingbirds need places to stop, safe places to stop, rest, and refuel. And then again, that makes them really vulnerable. If food's not available at the right time, or if there's weather patterns and things like that that affect them, and that pesticide exposure. So we're here in spring. How do they get here? They spent their winters, these lucky birds, down in Mexico and Central America. And then they make the solo journey. They just do this individually. They don't fly in groups or a pair or anything like that. It's a solo journey up into the United States to their breeding grounds. And they usually time that to coincide with the timing of flowering plants and this, when those become in bloom, or maybe the sapsucker migration. Sapsucker is another type of bird, type of woodpecker. They're going to fly by day, and they kind of fly sort of low so that they can see those food sources and stop along the way. And they're really just experts at using those tailwinds to help reach their destination faster so that they don't have to use as much of their body fat and use as much energy. So there's been some research that says that they can travel as much as 23 miles in one day. But they do migrate over the Gulf of Mexico, and when they do that, that's one trip. So they cross the Gulf at one time. Again, one bird on its, the hummingbirds are traveling by themselves. So they're not flying, in a formation or anything like that. That's about 500 miles that they're covering at once. Their average speed in this direct flight is about 20 to 30 miles per hour. They might fly, there's some that might fly along that coastal route, but the direct flight is going to be the shortest. And again, they do that as a nonstop direct flight. Takes about between 18 and 22 hours to complete. And again, that's about 500 miles they're doing it one shot. So they need to be really fueled up before they go on this journey. And then when they arrive here, right, they need to refuel because they've just been traveling from Mexico or Central America. So good news, they are here, guys. If you haven't seen them, they are here. They've been spotted in Wisconsin, so we can get out those feeders. So this is a website, Hummingbird Central. It tracks, now this isn't every single sighting of every single hummingbird, but it does track the migration. So you can start to check this out next spring and start to kind of know when to expect them. So they've been spotted in Wisconsin. I did this presentation 2 weeks ago and they were more down towards Missouri, so they definitely were not up here yet. Okay, so they're here, that's good news. When the fall migration happens, they go back that same route from here back down to Mexico or Central America, following their same route. Again, they have to cross the Gulf. And they really have to support that high energy level. They need to gain up to about 40% of their body weight before they do that. And they fly along on that same path. The young hummingbirds that are born this summer, they also do that journey without any help from a parent or an aunt or an uncle or anything like that. And they've never done it before. So they're also navigating that migration path just by their intuition and instinct. So migration, big energy demand, right? Big trip, exposure to lots of different things there. So once they're here, they have some really high energy demands, and we're gonna go through a few of those. They are very territorial. So the reason why you might only see one is that they're super territorial. Maybe that's the one that's covering that area. So they're gonna choose a territory based on the availability of food sources. And those males, again, they're going to have the red throat. They're going to aggressively establish and defend those territories. So they're chasing off insects. They're chasing off other birds, other hummingbirds, any intruders that dare to come into their territory. And so you might see some of this. You might see some of their acrobatic air shows as they're chasing off other hummingbirds or other birds or other things like that. Females also show aggression, and they're known to defend their nesting territories, but they've also been reported to share territories and the resources. So just kind of thinking about the size of their territory, a male ruby-throated hummingbird is able to defend a territory of about 1/4 acre or so, especially if it's like prime resources, right? So that means there's patches of flowers which have nectar. Maybe there's an artificial feeder in there to help. There's a good supply of insects, which we'll talk about. So then he doesn't have to leave. If you think about defending that territory and feeding, it's like when you're out of gas, right? You don't want to keep traveling to the farthest gas station. You need to have something close by. And females will forage. That means they'll feed up to 1/2 mile away from the direction of their nest. So they can also travel a pretty good distance, but they're not defending that large of a territory. And we'll see too, it's just impossible for her because she's got some other energy demands too. Another big energy demand is courtship. So the whole act of dating and mating here. So that male, he's migrated up, he's established his territory. Now the female is gonna come check it out. And that male is gonna perform some courtship displays to try to convince the female that he's the best one. So a couple of courtship displays just that you might have seen and that are really interesting. One of them is where he's attracting, again, this is all to attract the lady, right? He's trying to attract her attention. If you've ever seen this U-shaped dive where they start up high and they dive down and then they kind of pull up at the end and go back up. If you've never seen it, it's very cool. I've tried to find a video of it and I couldn't find one. But it is essentially this U-shaped dive. Their top speed gets up to about 50 miles an hour in that dive, and they pull up right at the end, and they're also making noise through their tails, and they're clicking, and they're doing, again, they're doing this dance to try to attract that lady. These really amazing, crazy dives. They might start up like about 50 feet, and then they dive down again up to speeds maybe 50 or so miles per hour, pulling up at the last moment to complete that U shape, and they keep doing that several times, and then he might take a little break. And then his wings are actually pretty loud in that courtship flight, so he's making some noises. He might be doing some vocalizations as well. And then, if that works, maybe the lady likes that. There's another courtship display where there's a video of this, and I'll play it. You'll see the male, you can kind of see him off on the side there. He's flying back and forth, and the female is perched by that feeder, and you'll see her watching him. And he's just flying back and forth, and you'll see him flaring his gorget, his throat feathers there. And she's checking them out, right? She's interested. So you can kind of see how those feathers, he's showing them off. So that's another, if you see that, if you're lucky enough to see that in your yard or at your feeder or around some flowers, that's another courtship display. So try to get a video of it. All right. So we talked about territory and territorial defense, high energy demands, courtship. Now for the females, another big energy demand is nesting. So as soon as mating is over, that female has little to do with the male. She becomes a single mom. So she has to make her nest, and she is going to nest in a tree, and she prefers maybe an oak or a maple, beech, birch, pine or spruce, all great options for nesting. She often uses kind of a downward sloping branch a little bit. And then she is collecting things like spider webs and maybe some soft plant parts, and she's weaving them into this little nest. And we saw, I mean, this is how big it is when it's done. This is a little bit blown up size. And you can see there what's on the outside of that those are lichens that are growing on trees. So she's collecting those and putting them on there so that she's camouflaging that nest. And it's really hard. I've never actually seen a nest. I know I have hummingbirds in my yard. I've never seen their actual nest. I mean, that is tiny to try to find it. So she's putting that kind of lichen on there to camouflage it. It's lined with plant down, so again, soft plant parts. And she is going to lay 2 eggs. Sometimes there's only 1, but there's never 3. So 2 is the ideal number for her, because that's really the number of chicks she can care for. And if she had 3 demanding nestlings, it would she probably wouldn't be able to do it. So after she lays those eggs incubate for about 2 weeks. If it's really cool weather, maybe closer to 3 weeks. And so this is an amazing thing about this female. She is going to be on those eggs, so she's on the nest for almost like 50 to 55 minutes out of every hour. So she has to still feed herself somehow, right? So she is sitting on those eggs, incubating those eggs. She's just going to have to dart off and get something, a quick snack, and come back. So if you think about where are her food sources, they have to be available. They have to be close by. Otherwise, it's going to take too much energy to go out searching for food to take care of those. And when those little chicks hatch, they're going to be naked. That means they don't have any feathers to start off with. They have really short bills, but every few days they're pretty much doubling in their size. But they can't, because they don't have any feathers, these are naked little chicks, they can't generate their own body heat either. So the female has to keep her chicks warm, she has to feed herself, and she has to feed her chicks. So she is balancing all those struggles and that conflict. So she can't be off the nest too long, but she still has to gather food. So how does she balance all that? They think that maybe the male that she mated with will also allow her passage into his territory. So that might help her out too, so that she minimizes that search for food. So she's collecting nectar and pollen and tiny insects in this storage unit called her crop. And then she returns to the nest and she regurgitates that into this lovely slushy for her nestlings. So again, every few days they're kind of doubling in size. Probably about after the first week is they'll have their first feathers. And they're in their nest for about 3 weeks. So the total elapsed time from egg laying to fledging when they leave the nest is about 5 to 6 weeks. And then they're on their own. They're done. They're going to search for their own food. Okay, they might stay close to that nest and kind of come back and be close to mom, but they're pretty much on their own to fly and find their own food. So if cold or wet weather or a bad storm, knocks that nest out or knocks the nestlings out, the baby birds, if it's early enough in the season, she might be able to mate again and have a second try at it, but it depends on when that happens. So if it happens right away, she might be able to mate again and re-nest, but if she got a late start or, you know, it's just happened late in the season, she won't have enough time. Okay, so lots of high energy demands, right? Nesting and raising young. So how do they fuel that? They must visit up to 2,000 flowers a day and eat 600 to 700 insects a day. Now, flowers and nectar are super important, but I'm going to tell you the insects are even more important. And that's for all birds, really. Even though we have seed feeders in our backyards, no bird in North America completes its entire life cycle on seeds alone. They have to have insects. Insects are high protein for their babies. They have to have insects, all birds. And we can look at hummingbirds specifically that they need, 600 to 700 insects. That's just for one nest, you know. I have a statistic in another program I do about black-capped chickadees. They collect about 350 to 500 caterpillars every day when they have their babies. So we absolutely need to support that. So here's the trivia question. So for nectar alone, if a hummingbird was the size of a human, how many gallons, I had that gallon jug for the visual, of nectar would they need? I'm going to read the guesses. 100 gallons. That's a lot. 1,500 gallons. 400. Holy cow. 2 gallons. 40. 50. 50. 5,000. How big is this hummingbird? 15. Ooh, I'm going to set that on the side. 10. 12. 5. All right, we'll find out. 15. So if they were our size, they would need 15 gallons of nectar every day. Okay, and if it's cold weather or they can't find enough flowers, they're not getting enough. And that's just the nectar alone that they need. And again, insects are really important. Flies, ants, beetles, and then spiders too are a really important source of protein and fat, especially for those babies. So they'll hover in front of flowers to drink nectar, but they're also picking insects off of those flowers and off of those plants. So you might not notice that, again, because they're so fast, but they're picking insects off the vegetation as well, and they can capture on the wing, so they can capture insects in the air while they're flying. So really the best way to encourage hummingbirds in your yard is to give them a diversity of nectar-producing flowers, which we'll talk about. And feeders can also help supplement them. So a diversity of plants, not only for the nectar, but again, a really healthy landscape for the insects. Those insects are so important. So if you do have feeders, again, these are great. These are supplemental. So they do help, especially on the front end when they've returned. So right now, you know, they need to refuel. Remember, they just crossed the Gulf of Mexico in one shot. Amazing. And they need to fuel up in the fall when they're ready to head back. So these really help, especially during those times. Hummingbird feeders are generally safe for hummingbirds. They can create a problem if they're making them an easy target for cats. So think about placement of your feeders. If you have outdoor cats, I would encourage you to bring them inside, not only for hummingbirds' sake, but all birds. Millions of songbirds are killed every day just because of outdoor cats. So we don't want to make them a target unnecessarily. And we need to keep them clean. So let's talk about selecting a feeder and how to keep it clean and kind of some tips. So with the feeders, when you're selecting a feeder, think about how easy it is to take apart and clean it. If it's really cumbersome and you can't clean it and you can't take it apart, then choose something else. You need to be able to clean it every time you fill it. And the size of the feeder is really depending on how fast it's getting emptied. So I've seen these really giant feeders. If it's not getting emptied within a couple of days, it's a waste because we need to be cleaning that out and refilling it every couple days. So more and smaller feeders would be better than one big giant one. Bacteria and mold can grow in that sugar water, and sugar ferments, so we don't want to leave it out for more than a few days. And when it's really hot out, we need to be changing it daily. So when it gets up in those 90-degree days, we need to be changing those feeders out daily. And again, that, if it's just you know, something where you could get like a bottle brush just to clean it out, you don't have to use like soap or any sort of disinfectants, just like hot water is fine. Scrub it out with a brush. We don't want any soap residues on them, so you know, don't stick it in your dishwasher or anything like that. Well, let's talk about where to place them. So remember, they're territorial, and they will fight off other birds and other hummingbirds off of that feeder. So you might only have one visiting your feeder. So try to put out, if you want to try to encourage more, and if you have the space, place more out, maybe about 15 feet apart. If you have, maybe you could put one like around the corner of the house so they're out of sight of each other. So that would be one attempt at trying to bring more in. Again, they're choosing their territory based on food sources and that availability. If you see those ones, they always have the little red plastic flowers, you know, on there. I see a lot of them with yellow plastic flowers, so those are supposed to be bee guards. But if that bee guard, that little plastic flower, is yellow, that attracts more bees. So yellow is a color that bees can see and are attracted to. So I would pluck that off, because you don't need it on there, because there's a little tube underneath there that they're sticking their beak into, right? Or there's ones that have red feeders, or red bee guards. But the ones with yellow actually can attract more bees. They don't necessarily need a feeder with a perch, but they certainly could have one. But they also feed on the wing. They feed while they're flying, so it doesn't have to have a perch. So that's, you know, up to you. There's so many different styles out there now. Let's see here. We talked about placement. So you can make your own sugar water, and it's just white sugar. This is the only time I ever say, like, just use white sugar. So we don't want any other types of sugars or sweeteners or honey, nothing else. It is white sugar, and it's a ratio of about 1/4 cup per cup of water. And what you're going to do is you're going to heat that up on the stove. Don't microwave it. You're going to mix that and heat it up in the on the stove. Don't put any other kind of additives or red food coloring in there. Just sugar water, and then you can fill that up. Now you could make a batch of it and keep it in your fridge for a week. I wouldn't really keep it longer than that. If you fill it, put it in a glass jar. So you could make, you know, maybe a couple cups of water for a 1/2 cup of sugar. That's okay, but again, we don't want to have it sitting around for a long time. The fresher, the better. So again, in hot weather, those feeders need to be emptied and cleaned every day. If it's not, you know, if that's like we're talking 90s. If it's a little warmer, maybe every other day. In cooler weather, it could be every 2 to 3 days. That would be okay. You know, if your hummingbirds are emptying that feeder with greater frequency, just clean it every time you are emptying it and feeding it, or filling it. And again, hot tap water works fine. You can use a weak, like, diluted vinegar solution. Just stay away from the dish soaps or the bleach or things like that. A very diluted vinegar, hot water is fine. Again, you can scrub it out with a bottle brush. We just don't want any residues that could be stuck on there. Okay, I have a discussion question for you. This is big. I don't know if you're on social media, but this has been the rage. These little handheld feeders, or people are attaching them all over their bodies. Yes, no, good, bad? What do we think?
Most likely bad.
People want to see them up close, right? I've seen there's lots of different ones. If you search Amazon, there's bracelets, there's things you can put on your glasses. I don't know. What do you guys think? You know, I don't know. I don't think there's actually been any research done on it. I think maybe a positive is that connection with nature that we all need. But I'm kind of leaning towards keep wildlife wild. you know, they are going to get used to humans. They come back to the same yard every year. They come back to the same feeder because they know it's there every year. You know, if they're getting too used where they're coming up to somebody like really close, that could make them more vulnerable to other humans that might have unsavory ideas or swat at them. I mean, there's been stories of them being collected and sold as like Lucky Charms and things like that. Really bad stuff. So, you know, I don't think, you think, well, everybody has good intentions, so hopefully that's not happening, but I don't know that we need to have them feeding out of our hand. But if you see it, that's up to you. It's an interesting experiment maybe. Again, I don't know, I've been looking for sort of any research done on this. Is it harmful to them? And I haven't seen anything yet, but. Okay, so remember, hummingbirds need to eat a lot. They need a lot of food because they're high paced and they have all these energy demands, especially those females because they're raising those babies. So they need both sources of nectar and insects. And what we really want to do when we're talking about what to plant is ensuring that we have diversity in our yard. So the more flowers, the better. And diversity, we need things blooming now because they're here now all the way into September. And that goes for pollinators. If you're trying to attract butterflies and, you know, pollinators to your yard, it's the same principle. We need things blooming all throughout the season so that you can feed them all season long. So one kind of thing to do right away is just take inventory. Do you have stuff in your yard blooming right now? I mean, I don't really have a lot blooming in my yard right now that they would feed on. So I would look at my yard personally and go, I need to plant some things that are blooming right now. You know, I have lots of stuff that's blooming in the summer and the fall, but I don't have anything blooming this early. Or maybe you have stuff blooming, you know, now, but not so much in August or September. So do a little inventory of your yard. What do you have? And again, these recommendations are the same for in pollinators too. Any kind of pollinator, we need the stuff blooming all season long. So just checking out what you have is a really good start to know what you have, and then that's going to help you narrow down what you're looking for because you're looking at that bloom time. This next one, really important, is to select plants that will grow well in the space that you have available. It is a lot easier to plant suitable plants in your space rather than trying to plant something that doesn't get enough light. You're always having to prune it. It's out of control. I mean, if you're always trying to amend the soil so that it grows, it's not a good fit. There's lots and lots of native plants that are great for this area, for our yards. So, you know, pay attention to that. What kind of light do you have? Is your soil, does it drain well? Does it not drain well? And find plants that are going to grow well in that site. And then if you're purchasing plants, see if they've been treated with pesticides. So a lot of plants out there in the nurseries have been treated with systemic insecticides. That means that the insecticide, because they don't want bugs on their plants, right? Well, we want bugs because our birds eat the bugs, but they don't want bugs on their plants. So a lot of places treat the plants with insecticide, which is a neonicotinoid usually, which is a systemic, which means it gets into the plant and gets into all parts of the plant. That means the pollen can be contaminated, the nectar can be contaminated with this chemical. So we have to start asking questions. Have these plants been treated? There usually is a sign that will say, you know, that it's been treated with something. Avoid that. We don't want anything treated with any sort of pesticides, especially insecticides. So start looking for that. Hummingbirds locate their food by sight, so not by smell, so by sight. They do like those flowers that are tubular and odorless and brightly colored. You know, they've kind of have evolved that red is usually a good supply of nectar, but they'll use other color flowers too. You're not limited to only having red flowers. I mean, you can see here, this hummingbird's on this foxglove, and that's a nice tubular shaped flower. We want the native or the straight up species of plants. We don't want something that has these really complicated double, triple, like petaled things. We need easy access to the nectar. So usually these like hybrids and all these types of other things that come out that are really kind of double flowered, they're called, that nectar is super hard to find even if it's there. A lot of those have a lot, greatly reduced nectar and pollen. So We just want to have flowers where they can access that. The sugar concentration in nectar really varies across plant species over time. So again, we want lots of diversity, so there's always a supply of nectar, and there's things blooming all the time. So that could include stuff in your containers, that could include flowering trees and shrubs, that can include some perennials, that can include annuals. Diversity, diversity, diversity. Mix it up. As many flowers as you can put in your yard. That's the best. And again, when we're kind of looking, here's just some different examples. That's a red sage, but here they are on a blue anise sage, and here they are in salvia. So different colors are fine. Red is definitely great, but they're going to visit flowers of different colors. It helps to have things kind of arranged or planted in groupings so that they can navigate that grouping, increases that visibility of that flower. Maybe that's the kind of same species or the same bloom time of flowers. Again, increasing that visibility. You're planting some large clumps. That can be really attractive. We don't want to make it too crowded. We still want some good airflow because we don't want to have all of that get really humid. Humid environments are great for diseases to grow, so we want to still have some airflow. So don't, pack it too full. We want them to be able to navigate around. Again, we can add in hanging baskets and containers and really extend the availability of flowers at both ends of the season. If you have some wildflowers in your yard, encourage those. Those are another source of flowers. And so I know everybody wants to know, well, what do I plant? Well, I don't know necessarily for your yard. It depends on your yard. So this is a list in this handout, which if you haven't grabbed it yet, it's on the back. And I can link it up for those watching. We can link it up maybe in the video, and I can give it to the library. But some examples, when you start searching, there's lots and lots and lots. There's lots of books about this. There are lots of websites. This is a starting point for you to start kind of researching. Again, when do you need some blooming flowers? This is going to show you flowering time. It's going to kind of look at those moisture. It's broken up by annuals and perennials, trees, shrubs, and vines. So, what are you looking for? So do a little bit of research, and it's really just kind of dependent on your yard. If your yard is really shady, that's going to be, different choices than maybe a sunny yard. So it really depends on your yard. So take a look around. Now this week it's getting pretty nice out. Go take a look around. What do you have blooming? Where do you have some space? What's that spot look like? Do you need to get maybe some weeds under control first before you plant? So start planning it out. Again, I try to give a list of things that are good choices, that are good hummingbird plants. This is not an exhaustive list. There's others that we can add to this. And I did include some websites and some other resources too. The linked up resources on the very back also gives lists of plants too. So there's lots and lots of choices. Maybe you're looking for a certain color to add to your yard. You can do that too. And whatever you plant, these are all good choices and good practices for lots of pollinators. So not only your hummingbirds, but your butterflies, your bees, all those things too. We want to try to grow healthy plants in landscapes. So again, remember, they're picking off insects off of those healthy plants. Okay? We need good, healthy plants that, the insects are part of that. So again, they're eating spiders. They're eating tiny insects like flies and gnats and mosquitoes and aphids. Again, they're trying to capture about 2,000 insects a day, especially to feed their young. Okay, they might pick up small caterpillars off flowers and leaves. Those are really juicy treats. Those caterpillars have a lot of fat and protein in there. But when we're thinking about growing healthy plants and landscapes, really we start talking about pesticides. So when we're thinking about hummingbird health and availability of those insects, we gotta look at pesticides use too. So a pesticide is a mixture or any kind of substance that is intended to prevent, destroy, repel, or mitigate any pest. So I'm kind of focusing in on insecticides, which kill insects. Other pesticides would be an herbicide. Or an herbicide is killing plants. We call it weed killer, but it applied to any plant, it will kill the plant. Herbicides can also contaminate pollen and nectar. So we have to be careful with how we use those. Other pesticide examples would be fungicides, those kill fungus. Rodenticides, those kill rodents. So anything with that kind of "-icide at the end we group them into this big group of pesticides. But let's really kind of think about those insecticides, which are targeting insects. Ideally, if we're thinking about hummingbird health and pollinator health in general, we want to eliminate or really limit pesticide use in general. We don't quite yet know how those chemicals are affecting. Again, we have some research now that those herbicides are contaminating some of that food. You know, if a caterpillar eats a leaf that's been treated with an herbicide, it's ingesting that herbicide, the bird eats that caterpillar, what happens? Now, hummingbird populations are really stable. They're not a threatened species. They are very stable. They're doing well because I think we all love them, right? They are the jewels of the garden. We are encouraging them in our yards. But when we look at other backyard species, either your common backyard species that you see in your yard, they're down 25 to 30% all across the United States. So, birds are suffering, and it is a lack of food. It is habitat availability. All of those things. So I know that it's hard to grow perfect plants, and I'm going to tell you, you don't have to have it look like a magazine. That's okay. But all of these things are all over the place. We have these products underneath our cabinets and in our garages and everywhere. So what do we do? And there's these services that we hire to come to our yards. Again, ideally we want to eliminate, but we can also use things really carefully if there is a problem. So, but maybe the first step is just to adjust our tolerance, right? Not all insects are bad. Healthy plants can tolerate insects and some damage. So I hear a lot when I get questions of, there's a bug on my plant, what do I spray on it? Like, okay, well, hold off. What is it? And is it a problem? Do we need to figure it out first? So let's first identify it, and then we can look at what options there are. Well, you might not have to do anything about it. It might be okay. And remember, caterpillars are going to turn into butterflies and moths. So we see caterpillars munching our leaves, but they turn into the things that we want in our yards. So we have to kind of balance what our tolerance of pests are, what we want our landscapes to look like and how we want to treat them. So you don't have to know what it is. Take a picture and send it to me. We have lots of resources through UW-Madison too. We have a plant disease diagnostic clinic. We have an insect diagnostic lab. We have a turf grass diagnostic lab. We have all these really great labs and resources and specialists. So I probably won't know every type of insect that's in your yard, but we'll find out. We'll figure it out. And if it's causing a problem, we can figure out what to do about it. And then also do your research before you plant new plants. So that is also what should I plant that's going to grow really well in my yard? Do your research before you buy any pesticide, and then definitely before you use any pesticide. And just kind of thinking about how hummingbirds are exposed. They're directly exposed to pesticides through their skin. If they're eating a contaminated food source, which could be an insect or nectar, or getting that pollen on them. So from a wildlife or avian or pollinator perspective, we really want to eliminate or limit or reduce our pesticide use. If we do need to use some sort of chemical for some reason, we can use it in a very safe way and a targeted way. So we're not just broadcasting insecticide, mosquito killer, herbicide all across our yard, right? We don't have to broadcast it and spray it all over the place. We obviously don't want to spray stuff on blooming flowers because that's what they're feeding off of. If we can maybe apply something in a very targeted way, maybe it's just this certain patch of weeds that we really just are trying to get under control, we can just spray that maybe later in the days when pollinators and hummingbirds are less active. Don't spray on hot or windy days. Those chemicals can attach to dust particles and they float on the wind for miles and miles and miles. So we don't want that to happen. If we're spraying it and then it rains, well, you just washed it off and it's washing off maybe into other parts of the landscape. And again, really targeted applications. So before you kind of reach for any chemicals, just thinking about, well, what are you using it for and why? Do you need to? And then let's use some practices to apply it really safely. And before we close out, there are some other things that you can do at home. You know, shrubs and small trees do provide perches. So they spend a lot of time flying around, but they do perch. We had, in my personal yard, we had this dead crabapple tree in my yard, and our hummingbird perched on it every single day, multiple times a day. And my husband's like, oh, we got to take that tree down. I go, no, take it down in the winter. That's fine, but don't cut it down when the hummingbird is using it. Like that hummingbird, every day we could watch it. And so he did cut it down over the winter, and that hummingbird's going to be mad that its perch isn't there. But, you know, check it out. Be observant. If you have something, a dead tree, if it's not causing a problem, there's lots of insects in there for all the birds. And it might be a good perch. You know, if it's in danger of like falling on something, then yeah, you might need it removed, or if there's some storm damage or something that you need to take care of. But thinking about just kind of being really observant, what spaces are they using? Are there some good perches, or do you need to maybe add some? All animals need water, so for drinking and bathing. So some shallow, you know, dishes, bird baths, things like that are all good. Planting even native thistle, milkweed, fern species, that provides those females with some nesting materials too. We talked about cats, keep those away. They can kill hummingbirds. Bells and declawing them are ineffective. They can still knock them down. So don't place your feeder next to some vegetation like a shrub where maybe a cat could be hiding in if your cat is outside or the neighbor's cat is outside. So just thinking about location. So this was just kind of a glimpse into their fast-paced and furious life. Again, lots of resources here, but I'm happy to stick around and try to answer questions or point you in a direction. What did I miss? What are you still wondering about?
They stay away from other birds that if you have other feeders out there?
Will they stay away from other birds if you have other feeders out there? They will chase off other birds. So other birds, I mean, I've heard of orioles using hummingbird feeders, but they might chase those off too. What happens a lot of times with hummingbird feeders too is you get ants in them, or they get a lot of wasps and stuff. I've noticed that if I'm not maintaining it, I'll just take it down because I don't want to have a dirty feeder out, or if it's, you know, if it's covered with bees all the time, I'll just take it down. They're getting food, again, they live in areas up in northern Wisconsin along stream banks and stuff where there's not a lot flowering. There's not a lot of flowers, but they are eating insects, tons and tons of insects. So I don't know how much. I think they pretty much stay away from other birds because they're so territorial. Yes?
You mentioned the wasps.
Yeah.
Every once in a while underneath my eave of my shed, my garden shed outside, wasps found a spot they want to start nesting. Don't spray it with the wasp spray, try to just knock it down, or what do you recommend?
So is it in an area, okay, so you asked, I'll repeat this for the video, about when you have wasps creating a nest in a spot, maybe under the eaves, how to deal with that. If you can avoid, if you can let them just do their thing and avoid it. Now, if it's like right by the doorway that you're going in and out of. Okay. If it's in a spot where you can let them be, let them be. They are annual nesters, so they're not going to return to that same exact nest every year. So then you could knock it down, you know, after a good frost. They usually die out after that. If it is in an area that you need to do something, I wouldn't knock it down if it's being actively used. There are sprays that you can use that you would apply at night. So all the wasps go in there at night, and then you could spray it and then kill them and knock it down. I know we don't like wasps, but wasps are really good predators and really good pollinators. So if we can let them be in spaces that are not harmful to us, our kids, you know, things like that, then let them be.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. What else? Let me know when you see some hummingbirds in your yard for sure. I haven't seen one yet, but.
If you're starting out, like, you don't have any plants yet, do you need to do anything special to the soil or add anything to the soil, the topsoil, or just go with what you've got, like with a garden tiller? And
yeah. So the question was, if you're just starting off and you don't have anything there, is it just grass there now? Okay, just grass and you're starting off. What to do? get rid of the grass. So you can remove that by hand, get a sod remover from the hardware store or, you know, Home Depot or something. It depends. If there's other weeds growing in there, I would try to get the weeds under control. There's some different methods for that. If it's just turf and you can kind of remove that turf, compost is a great thing. Adding either, you know, you can get it from landscaping supply, you can get it from the store and purchase compost. There's some municipalities that have compost. Compost is good, and working that into the soil, I would say, and then planting. But I get really impatient where I buy a bunch of stuff and I get home, I'm like, oh, I don't really have a place to put this. Really good at spending that wagon full of money of, you know, oh, look at all these pretty plants, but I don't have a spot. So I'm really trying to get better at planning of, okay, I want to put stuff here and taking care and getting that area prepared, and then maybe planting the following year. So it depends, and we can talk more, you know, specifically about what you have. But I also kind of say go for it too. You know, if it's not like a super overgrown weedy area, then the weeds aren't so bad.
On native plants,
Yeah.
what's the best way to find them and keep them in your yard? But I know native plants tend to take over. Suggestions.
Sure. So the best way to find native plants and to kind of keep them going in your yard. Now, not all native plants spread easily, so you can look for kinds that don't spread easily. Maybe it's a space that you want them just to go wild. Well, you know, you can find those that look for that in their description, spreads easily, or maybe it doesn't. They can certainly be maintained from year to year by cutting them back or dividing them. Where to find native plants, there's a lot of really great native plant nurseries in Wisconsin. The DNR maintains a list of those nurseries separated out by geographic region. And I can always send you that link. Send me a nudge, shoot me an email, and I can send you that link directly. There is a native plant nursery, Agricol, which isn't too far from here. They're really good. So, and native plant nurseries, what they're really good too is they have it all. They usually have plant mixes or seed mixes or descriptions for kind of your site. So they might say, oh, well, these plants are great for a shady site, or these plants are really great for a sunny, dry site. They have a lot of that information where they are already kind of customized those plants, and then you can kind of pick and choose. So I would go to a native plant nursery and start there. And again, there's a lot of really great ones in Wisconsin. So I would go for ones that grow their plants from the Midwest. Does that answer? Did I answer all the questions? Native plants, I mean, any plants needs, if you're planting perennials, they need some time to get established. So they do need water, some good watering the first few years. After that, you know, especially if they have some drought tolerance, that you might not need to water them as much. But definitely to help them get established, they're going to need some help.
Is there any native plant that they prefer, that a hummingbird or pollinators prefer over any other one?
There's so many. I mean, any native plants, because that's how native plants have evolved with insects and birds. They've all co-evolved together. So their life cycle and the timing of when that food is available all matches up. So the native plants have the resources available at just the right time in the insect's life cycle or the bird's life cycle of when they're accessing those plants. So any Wisconsin native plants, and there's, I mean, hundreds of choices. So again, it depends on, you know, you have shady, sunny, rocky, dry. I have really heavy clay, so it's like solid clay, so I have to look for things that, you know, can grow in that. So you got to do some research. But there's lots of great resources. There's lots of great books. I can, you know, I can share more too if you're looking for something particular. There's also an evaluation form. I'll just mention that. I will stick around for questions. You're welcome to come up. Evaluation form that looks like this. If we just pile them up back at the table, I appreciate your feedback. You're not required to fill it out. I am required to have it available and to ask. So thanks for coming. And again, I'll stick around if there's any other questions that are lingering.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.